Preach on a book that I've never preached on before in the Bible. It is Ecclesiastes. I went about my normal habit of looking at the readings last Thursday and Friday for this week when I knew I was on the job. But Ecclesiastes kept sort of forcing its way into my mind, and I started reading it over the last weekend. And I went through this quite elaborate process of, first of all, asking myself, why is this book in the Bible? This is a short book, but it's also a book that's very demanding in what it's asking of us to try and understand it. It's a book that's, to a lot of people, sounds almost despairing. Dark book, looking out on the human condition and saying, this is terrible. Everything in this world is stuffed. It is bad what is happening. And you think, well, why is it there? And it has created a lot of controversy. There are some people, quite notable figures, who think it ought to be chucked out of the canon. It's not there for any good reason. Others have a very high view of it. So what I want to do now, I'm going to read you 3 paragraphs from different theologians. 1, Luther. 2, a novelist, an American novelist called Thomas Wolfe, and also another Lutheran. His name is Dr. Herbert Leopold. And each have a different view about Ecclesiastes. I want to read them to you, and then we'll go into Ecclesiastes and see what you make of it. First of all, Luther. He says this: some foolish men have not understood this book and have therefore taught absurd ideas about contempt for the world and flight from it, and they themselves have also done many absurd things. Thus, in the lives of the fathers, we read that there were some who did not even want to look at the sun because it was beautiful. Such men deserved to have their eyes gouged out. And who, for the sake of religion, ate the filthiest of foods. Now, he's talking about the desert fathers, who used to talk about the number of lice that fell off their body. They used to wear hair shirts. I mean, one fellow in his enthusiasm decided he'd go the extra mile, wear 2 hair shirts. I mean, what's the point of that? The proper contempt of the world is not, this is Luther, that of the man who lives in solitude away from human society, nor is the proper contempt of gold that of the man who throws it away, or who abstains from money as the Franciscans do, but that of the man who lives his life in the midst of these things and yet is not carried away by his affection for them. This is the first thing that should be considered by those who are about to read Solomon. He says Solomon because it's traditionally thought that Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes. See, so Luther's saying this book is really about how we relate to the things that are around us, the things that are ours, our home, our car, our garden, our bank account, our health, all the things that are ours. And he says this book, Ecclesiastes, may lead some people wrongly to say everything in the world is useless. He says, no, there is a balance. He says, we worship God in the midst of this world. And he draws the distinction at the point. He says this, but we are not meant to be carried away by our affection for these things. So what does he mean? I think you know. He says there is a point where you hunger, you prize the things of this world so much, you cannot let them go, they preoccupy your mind. But he says there is another way where you sit more loosely with the stuff of this world. That's him. Now listen to Dr. Herbert Leopold. He says, especially, he's another Lutheran, this guy, by the way. But I've got to say, after I've read this little paragraph, I thought he sounds very much like a Presbyterian. Especially in evil times, men should stake no hope on earthly goods or pleasures. The best service that can be rendered a man is to divorce him from the things of this world as completely as possible. We call that disillusionment. The author strives to achieve such an end as thoroughly as possible. Men who know the vanity of all things are well prepared for the trials of evil times. She does sound like a Presbyterian. But this is a very pessimistic view. He's gone way beyond what Luther would regard as a balanced approach to the world. He's saying we should always be prepared for the worst of all possibilities. And if disaster comes to us, if we lose everything, we find ourselves like a Syrian refugee, fleeing for our lives with a couple of bags in our hands. He said, the best preparation for a time like that is to have, in a sense, a contempt for the things you own, so you can just walk away from them, and you're not in despair and so on. Now let me read Thomas Wolfe, a great American novelist. He says, of all I have ever seen or learned, that book seems to be the noblest, the wisest, the most powerful expression of man's life upon this earth, and also the highest flower of poetry, eloquence and truth. I'm not given to dogmatic judgments in the matter of literary creation, but if I had to make one judgment, I would say that Ecclesiastes is the greatest single piece of writing I have ever known, and the wisdom expressed in it the most lasting and profound. Extraordinary words. So, let's get into this book and tell me in the end where you stand. Are you with Luther? Are you with Wolfe? Or are you with Dr. Leopold? So this book has two voices in it. It's only 12, was it 12? Yeah, it's 12 chapters. 2 pages, 3-4 pages, that's it, tiny little book. And has two voices. One is a voice that introduces the speaker that is referred to with a Hebrew word, kohelet, that is interpreted as a teacher. So this voice, just in the first few verses, introduces the teacher. The teacher speaks right until the last 2 verses, and then this other voice comes back in. Now, what I'll do is I'll just try and pull out just take some random reading so you get a feel for what this book is saying. And then I'm going to defend it using one of the thoughts of one of my great mentors in the faith, Soren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is the contemporary Ecclesiastes as far as I'm concerned. So, it goes like this. I, the teacher, when king over Israel in Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all is vanity and chasing after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I perceived that this also is just chasing after wind. I said to myself, come now, I'll make a test of pleasure. I'll enjoy myself. But again, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it's mad. And of pleasure, what's the use of it? I searched with my mind how to cheer my body with wine, my mind still being guided by wisdom. It didn't overstep the mark here. I like that distinction. My mind is always guided by wisdom in those situations. And how to lay hold on folly until I might see what was good for mortals to do under heaven. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools of water to water the forest of growing trees. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. And again, he looks around at all that he has achieved and he says, it's nothing. It's vanity. It's futility. It's stupidity. These are the words he uses. So what gain have the workers from their toil? This is a particular problem with this guy. He keeps coming back to this point. He said, look, I can become very rich, and at one level you could say I'm a lot better off because I'm rich than those poor characters over there who don't know where their next few dollars are coming from. He said, but both of us are going to die, and within a generation we'll be forgotten. And everything that we laboured to bring into fruition in this world, it's just going to disappear. It will be as if it never was. And that really plays on this fella's mind, that in the end, we all come to the same end, and we all die. And things just disappear. He says, so what's the point? What's the point of greedily or with great perseverance accumulating things which at one level seem good, but in the end they come to nothing? And then in other places he's looked around and he sees injustice everywhere. How come this world reeks of injustice? He says it's governments that create this much of the time. So what is the point in having governments? Moreover, he said, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, wickedness was there. And in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there as well. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for he has appointed a time for every nation and every work. Again, I saw all of the oppositions that are practiced under the sun. Look at the tears of the oppressed, with no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, with no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who had already died more fortunate than those who are living, who are still alive. At one point he said, it's better to be a baby born, a stillborn, than a king who's pursued from all sides and lives in fear of his life. So this sort of dark despair goes on, and it is unrelenting in this book. When he looks at the plight of oppressed workers who have no capacity to stand up for himself, he doesn't have any suggestions as to how this might be changed. He just looks at it and says, look at that. Look over here. He sees nothing around him that gives him reason to hope in any substantial way. So you can see why people say, what is this book doing here? The only suggestion that there is a sort of antidote to all this comes in the last 2 verses of the book. And that is the different voice. And it says this: the end of the matter That's the end. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And that's the end. That's what he comes to. It's a very dour sort of understanding of the nature of this world. So, let me tell you what Kierkegaard thinks about this book, because I agree with him. Kierkegaard lived at the end of the 1700s, and he's a Dane. And some people refer to him as the father of existentialism, which I don't think he is really, but that's another matter. But he was obsessed, you could say, with discovering the true essence of Christianity while living within what he called Christendom, the national church of Denmark, the Christian church. And within that church he said, I can't find Christianity. And he turned his thoughts to what he said was the fundamental point of clarifying the essential teachings of God, and that is in that personal encounter, one-on-one with God. And he said, if we are going to, if we want to know who Jesus was and what his teachings really amount to, then we have got to present ourselves to God and face what he calls the prospect of annihilation. Because if we come to God without an understanding of who we are, we will miss the whole thing. And as far as Kierkegaard was concerned, much of the church was actually keeping people from that encounter. It was creating a sort of safe haven within which people could say, well, I'm in the church, I'm a Christian, I'm part of the national church, so that's fine. And people seek what he called a sort of slapdash consolation by talking to each other about the faith and so on, and not talking to God. So, in order, according to Kierkegaard, for us to really confront God, we have to first confront our humanity. And he says a lot of people can't do that. They can't truly look in and say, who am I? And it is for this reason that Kierkegaard writes books with titles like this. One of his books was Of Fear and Trembling, the concept of dread, the concept of anxiety. These are the books he wrote. And the sickness unto death. For him, the sickness unto death was that prospect of being captured by something that looks like Christianity, but strangely is patting you on the head, keeping you safe, keeping you quiet, keeping you contained and essentially hopeful, but never allowing you to face the full reality of who you are and what the situation is. Because unless that is the case, unless we see that, then we don't know who God is. And this is where Ecclesiastes comes into the story, you see. And I call Kierkegaard the new Kohelet, the new voice of Ecclesiastes for this age, is because he forces us to look out into the world. And this is what I think Ecclesiastes does. The talker in this book says, and I looked at everything under the sun. He said, I'm looking at everything. I said, I'm not looking at the world with the eyes of a Christian anymore. I'm simply looking out at what is going on. And everything this guy says, I say, is right. And look at the world. Now we can hide within the church when we can create this safe atmosphere, and we can invite people in and they say, oh, it's lovely here. This is nice. I feel safe. I feel sort of comforted and so forth. Prophets don't like that. And this is the product of the prophetic insight these poor characters called by God to stand up in our midst and say, you think everything's okay, don't you? Look at that. And I'll point at something and say, everything is at stake. You say it's okay, but look at those people on Manus Island. Look at the people in Nauru. Look at what's happening over here. So that is what we have got to come to terms with. That is the reality of this life. And so, Ecclesiastes has a role, and I think it is one which we ought to savour every now and then. So, it's short, it's punchy. Why don't you read it through and think of it in that light? Don't flee from it. Say, oh, this is dark, this is nasty, I don't want to hear that sort of stuff. He's telling us the truth. And he's telling us, I believe, to confront it. And with that truth in us, then we can stand before God and say, I know who I am. I need your forgiveness and your love. I'm meant to be saved. That's it.